Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Ask Me Anything series. My name is Shanna McCardle. I am the event director here at Sports Innovation Lab. Today, we're excited to welcome Amy Huchthausen, the commissioner of the America East Conference. Welcome to Amy. And before I get into formal introductions, just want to give you a little background about our Ask Me Anything series. We started this to provide access to leaders in the industry that were taking risks and taking action. And really our main goal was to garner perspectives from across the industry, from operators to players and from teams to leagues. And as you can see with our lineup of past guests, we've done just that. Here is all the companies that we have welcomed on past Ask Me Anythings. So if you have not been able to join us for all of these, I encourage you to please check out our website where we have all the past recordings posted, and I will make sure to share that link with you after this introduction. So just a few quick reminders. Please join our Slack community. We started this a couple of months ago. We've grown the community to over 1,100 members. It's really a great place to share ideas and meet new people. So here's the link, and I'll put this in the chat window as well. Next week, we're excited to welcome Rajan Mehta, the Chief Technology and Product Officer for the WWE. He's going to be talking about media convergence and really reaching a global audience using different media formats. So it should be an interesting conversation. That will be next Thursday, June 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And I will share that registration link as well. Quick reminder, as I said, all of these are recorded, so we ask you please stay on mute, but we do want you to ask your questions. So please use the chat function right at the bottom of your screen. You just click on that and that'll open a window. You can ask your question right there. Now to introduce our host, Josh Walker. Many of you know him as the co-founder and president of Sports Innovation Lab. Came from Forrester, where he was a VP of research. He currently stewards our research team here at Sports Innovation Lab and is responsible for introducing the world to the concept of the fluid fan. You've probably seen Josh's name or heard his voice recently, as he's been quoted in many publications discussing the resurgence of sports. And now on to our guest. Like I said, we're excited to welcome Amy Huchthausen, Commissioner of America East. A little background on Amy. She has increased the conference's profile through progressive media partnerships and a robust social and digital media strategy. Under Amy's leadership, America East unveiled a comprehensive rebranding platform that led to many new programs. Additionally, the conference is a diversity and inclusion leader through its groundbreaking partnerships. Notably, Amy was recognized as a 2016 40 Under 40 honoree by the Sports Business Journal, and we are thrilled to have Amy here. So with that, I will hand it over to Josh.
Awesome. Thank you, Shanna. Amy, good to see you. Thanks for joining us today. It's really one of those pleasures to be able to get other people to recommend AMA guests, and you have been widely recognized as one of the forward thinkers in college athletics. So that's a really easy way to embarrass you right at the beginning of this, which is that most of your colleagues and your peers say that you're pushing the envelope, you're thinking differently, you're doing things differently. So we were really excited that you said you would join us here. So I appreciate you doing that.
Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. So let's dive right into it, because your world's been thrown upside down like everybody else's. You happen to have one of those smaller, more nimble conferences in the college world. Tell us a little bit about how your life has changed over the last few months, what normally you would be doing around this time of year, and what you're really finding yourself doing at this stage.
Yeah, just like everyone, the obvious things. You know, I'm in my apartment taking this meeting, which is just meeting after meeting. Not moving from this place for the last 3+ months practically. Busier than ever, busier than I candidly would have thought in the first 48 hours after everything shut down in March. But I think after everything settled in, we got our wits about us and we learned a little bit more about the virus and understood that this was going to stick around for a while. You just sort of hunker in and change your mindset and get ready to go. So that part's definitely different in terms of how we operate, the things we're working on right now. You know, what I would normally be doing right now, we would be sort of in the home stretch of the academic year. June is a big month of meetings in college sports, conference meetings, things like NACDA and other events. We have commissioner meetings next week, which we still do, although they'll be virtual. So it really would be looking at an eye towards like that 4th of July holiday week and trying to get away and wind down before you have to recharge. And we're just not we're not able to do that right now. It's 100% sort of Mach 10 with
And
the
what
site.
and when you normally have this period of time when we're not in the middle of a health crisis, what kind of decisions need to be made before July 4th and everybody sort of disappears for a little while?
For us internally, in normal times, it would be getting ready for our summer planning session for our staff. We have quarterly planning sessions like probably a lot of organizations. And we really dive in on that summer one to set our roadmap for the next academic year, right? And so that's building on things that our administrators would have just adopted at their meetings a couple weeks ago, and really mapping that out in a, while aggressive and ambitious kind of way, but still very controlled around, we know what we're doing, we're building on new initiatives, maybe have a few new ones, but that's what we would be doing right now. And honestly, I'm a big believer in taking some time off and mentally recharging, emotionally recharging, physically recharging, so that you can come back in the summer or later summer and hit the ground running. So that's what we would be doing now, is a lot of just planning and trying to take care of ourselves individually, because that's so important.
Well, I mean, again, I think that's one of those early leadership lessons I was taught by my bosses growing up, which was you have to have that mental space to actually free your mind so that you can think clearly about the things that you're doing. None of us seem to have that capacity right now because our lives are so compacted by this thing. When you think about sort of what's changed, are there new things that are going to prevent you from even taking time off this summer? Are there new decisions that need to be made, or do you just need to work through some stuff that just has to get done?
Yes and no. I mean, I will personally need a break, and we're encouraging our staff to take a break. We're taking tomorrow off, not to take a break, but to honor and recognize Juneteenth and all the things that are associated with that. But that allows reflection time, candidly, for the latest big thing that we're all dealing with, which is all the racial injustice issues that have come to the fore in the last few weeks. And there's not been time to reflect on that, Josh, even, on top of all of the pandemic related stuff. And so I'm hopeful that that's going to give like a quick shot of a break for at least our staff and other people around the country that are honoring that day, to reflect just on that piece. But getting back to like the broader spectrum of college athletics, there'll be a break. There has to be. Like, I know for myself mentally, I need a break. And so around the 4th of July, I'm hoping, knock on wood, to have a couple days where I can, like you said, get away and just think. I think best, we all think best, I think, when we've got uninterrupted time. And the weekends have provided that to me here and there over the last few months. But we've been kind of busy over the last few weeks, which I'm sure we'll talk about in terms of adding a new school and things like that. So I'll still build in spots just because it is like physically and emotionally essential to my well-being and ability to be a productive leader. But there's no real stopping. It's more just a pause.
Well, I'm not going to gloss over the Juneteenth comment because we've got a lot of stuff I want to walk through with you on the equality side of things and a lot of the diversity initiatives that you've done at the conference. But you did mention the new school. So let's dive into that first and maybe table some of the diversity conversation for later. The new school that you added is your 10th school. You want to talk a little bit about what that decision was like and how it came about?
Yeah, we just announced our board meeting last week that they voted in unanimously the addition of New Jersey Institute of Technology, or otherwise known as NJIT, as our 10th member to the league. It happened in a much quicker time frame than these conference alignment decisions usually happen, and I just chalk it up to a few things. One, these are unusual times, and so they call for unusual measures, and that's a big piece of it. The other piece is we've been very familiar with NJIT over the years, so there was less learning about the institution that we needed to do at this point in time in our decision making. But it was really, as we look around and everyone is so nervous about the economy and what higher education is going to look like, people are cutting budgets, some schools unfortunately are cutting sports. We were thinking, and our schools are not immune from any of those tough decisions, but
I don't think any school is, right?
Yeah, we were also thinking, what are some things we could do? What are some levers we could press so that once this is over, or once we settle into whatever the new normal is going to be, we have acquired some assets that will allow us to emerge stronger than we entered it. And the, acquisition, if you will, of a school, I think allows us to do that. For those unfamiliar with NJIT or the America East Conference, like I have to get used to my updating my numbers. But prior to NJIT, we were 8 of 9 publics here in the Northeast, major public research institutions. NJIT fits that institutional profile extremely well. They're a top 100 school. Like, for those that are familiar with how higher ed ranks research categories, they're an R1, which is the highest level of research in ranking in the United States. So they fit profile-wise, they fit geographically, and it just makes a lot of sense from that perspective.
So you use the word acquisition, and that's a very interesting term, because in the business world, you have to acquire a bunch of funds or investors to go out and acquire an asset. You view a new school entering the conference as an asset. You just use that terminology because you're building sort of that entire body of value for the conference, right? Because that will translate into sponsorship, that'll translate into media rights, that'll translate into the revenue that comes into the conference. What type of due diligence do you normally do when you're going out and thinking about, okay, it's the right time, A, to add a new school, B, these are our targets. Do you create a target list? Do you say, these are the 5 we could add, let's go do some due diligence? You said it was very abnormal given the time period, so I'm assuming most of the normal things you would do, you didn't do, but walk us through sort of like how a commissioner thinks about that opportunity.
Yeah, we do have, I think everyone has their list of, schools that if things fell right, they'd love to have. Everyone, just like you have a short list if you've got to hire someone. I think every company.
But how many can you have? I mean, is it like you need something to fall off before you can add another, or can you continue?
There's not a magical number, and that's where you see everywhere from the Ivy League with 8 up to the bigger conferences. I think some have like 14 might be the biggest number. I'm not sure. So there's a range there, but it is all about just fit, in terms of the value an institution can provide. If they are to provide value on your acquisition of the asset, they've got to fit. You can't have an outlier, in my view. So that's where they fit. So while I think we still did our diligence. I would submit that we did, even if it was done in a much more rapid way in terms of the academic profile, the sports portfolio, and the geographic footprint. Those are the 3 biggest things that we look at that we think will position us for value in the short term, or in this case, I think especially in the long term, because they check all those boxes so well for us.
And I'll get to one of the first questions that came in, because it's really in line with this as well, which is that, your conference is very well known for basketball, largely because UVM is sick, and I can just do a shout out to my brother's school on that one. So much fun watching them make the tournament every once in a while. How are you guys working on creating visibility for the other sports other than basketball within the conference? What specific initiatives do you have that put some of the other sports maybe not on parity or the same level, but continue to elevate them? And how do you just choose where to put your resources on that front?
Yeah, in terms of the mechanisms, we've tripled down on social media early on, like shortly after I started. I didn't have the answers, but I saw that there was a power there in terms of generating and creating your own content and reaching people in a way that a mid-major conference just is not able to do, particularly a mid-major conference in schools in the Northeast, which is very much a pro sports dominated market. To try and break through, even for like the biggest colleges here, it's tough. It's tough on the college sports scene. So it was leveraging that asset, if you will, in terms of how can we push forward on behalf of our school. So that's one. And we've built out our content team, I think, as well as any other mid-major conference in the country. I feel very confident about that. And continue to push forward in terms of the different technologies and all those types of things. But it's really identifying, I think, the stories and the teams and the personalities that we have in other sports. So college basketball, just by the nature of the sport, makes that the most visible piece for us in the American East. But if you're measuring sort of toe-to-toe or head-to-head in terms of national success, candidly, we have found more success in our lacrosses, in having #1 ranked teams, had a team make it to the Final Four of the college lacrosse, men's lacrosse championship. We've had a team in the College Cup, which is a men's soccer Final Four. Had a team in the Final Four of field hockey, championship. So we've had success in all those other sports, but to your point about how do you generate exposure, it's through social digital media, and then through our ESPN partnership over the last 5 years has really provided the obvious exposure that for those sports as more of those games are broadcast on that platform, that we were not able to deliver under our own devices.
And as a commissioner, how do you think about amplifying the digital resources that you have at each of the schools? Do you feel like you need to replicate some of that functionality, meaning build the team of social media experts within the commissioner's office, the conference office? Or do you feel like it's really setting out best practices, taking the aggregate of the voice of your different schools and then elevating it? How do you sort of think about that?
It's more of the latter. It's very complementary, I view it, because someone who's running social media or communication strategy at our schools, I know what their job is to promote their school. We hope that we build over time this collaborative culture in our league where they see how we are not trying to overstep their boundaries or step on their toes, but to really, to your point, amplify in a complementary way what they're doing. They post something really cool or a great story, we're pushing it on our platform, and vice versa. And I think that unusual sort of web of communication and collaboration for a conference is incredibly critical if you want to achieve your overall objectives, which is to grow the conference brand. It can't just be our 11-person staff, down at Seaport pushing this stuff out if we don't have the cooperation from our schools, because they each have their own fan bases that are bigger than ours as a conference. So that's what it's building, the tools and the systems, or I'm sorry, the physical and mechanical pieces of it. But it's more important, I think, and what I'm proud of is the culture that we built among the league, that they see us as partners in this overall content strategy rather than competitors.
Yeah, well, I mean, like every good parent, I'm sure you love all your children equally, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to brag about one particular one. Is there any school that does a phenomenal job that you're like, wow, if I could get everybody in the conference doing more stuff like this, these guys have really cracked the code on how to engage their fans or how to create really engaging social media, or they've really figured out a way to stimulate that conversation that we're looking to stimulate online?
I'm not going to fall for that and pick one. I will say the value of having 9, though, is that, nine schools, now 10 schools, all doing their own different thing, all having sports and different marketing or external objectives, is you really get a collection of a lot of different strategies and tools, right, and tactics that people are using. So, one school does great original video capture work and puts out profiles right after even a practice in a way that's really artful and creative. Another one, another school of ours has done a great job of clipping games in highlights in game and pushing that to social right away. Others have been better about the broader messaging rather than just the traditional SID work. Here's what happened in the game and the score is 4-3, but shifting that and using social in other ways to promote that in a more brand way than just a sports reporting kind of way. So I think we get the benefit of seeing all of those different things, and that's what I like. And they learn from each other.
All right, so you're going to run for office someday, because that was very well done. I wasn't trying to paint you into a corner as much as I'm trying to understand, as a scrappy, smaller conference with not the big budgets that the larger schools and the larger conferences have, are the universities using some of their interns and their film departments and their creative departments to do all this stuff, or do they have full-time staffs that they're actually using to amplify the value? Because we're going to talk about media rights in a minute. Are you getting that level of professional support from the schools, or do they treat this like, hey, this is part of coursework, we're going to use all the things that we have at our disposal to do this? You want to answer that?
Yeah, it's a mix. On the production side, we have a few schools that are definitely relying on students, whether it's part of an actual curriculum. I think we have at least one school that has built that into the curriculum. In others, they do have, like on the video capture stuff that I talked about, it's a full-time videographer that runs around as many practices and games, and then edits and cuts it and pushes it out. So it's different everywhere based on the resources, the academic programs that sit at that particular school. But again, I like seeing the variation in the creativity, because that's just surfaced so many new ideas that they then share across. If we were so prescriptive, you had to have this kind of staff, this many people, I don't know that we'd see or you had to use all of these platforms. While there'd be some consistency and efficiencies gained, it also would, I think, limit the creativity that we've seen from our nine schools. So
Yeah, the creativity and the personalities of those schools just kind of emerging organically, right? So media rights, let's talk about it. It's how most of the conferences sustain themselves and get large amounts of money that come in. We talked a little bit about this over the years. You did some work with me when I was thinking about how Google was doing cloud infrastructure for some of the different conferences, but also some of the larger schools when it came to media production. We've been looking at this space as how Amazon's trying to enter, but also all the large tech companies that are looking for niche content that they can afford, right? If they can't get into the NFL, if they can't get into Major League Baseball, they're looking for niche content where they can really reach that enthusiastic sports fan at a regional or local level. You guys have a long-term deal with ESPN. Can you talk a little bit about how that is structured and what your goals are for media rights going forward?
Yeah, we're about to enter, I believe, our 5th year of an 11-year deal with ESPN. We signed that before the public announcement of ESPN Plus. We signed it right around, I think shortly, right around the time when the BAMTech ESPN partnership was developed. So we knew something was coming. We knew an OTT service was coming, even though we didn't know what it looked like yet. So the first couple of years were ESPN3 exclusive, and then obviously we've migrated to Plus for a majority of our content. So that works well for us. We have, we try to encourage our schools to push as many of their games as possible to ESPN Plus. There are, certainly production requirements that ESPN has for getting those games up there. There's room there, I think, for growth and modification on their end in order to increase the number of productions they're getting from our conference or any other conference, and a lot of mid-major conferences are partnered with them. So that's one. And then on the other side, on our end, like the part we control is what are the different production capabilities and technologies out there that would allow us to meet their production requirements in a less expensive or less resource impacting way. Even when you just think about the number of people it takes to put that together. So that's loosely how our deal is structured, Josh. It's primarily a digital play. We do have some linear games. Obviously, our men's basketball championship has that nice window on that Saturday morning of March Madness week, which we really like and appreciate. But it's really focused on the digital piece for us in terms of the greatest way we get our exposure.
So I'm going to be completely honest and admit I don't know how this works. So I'm assuming that if the University of Maine has the right production skills, meaning they pay to put the game together the way ESPN would require, that it would get broadcasted, it would get distributed. Are you saying that that's not the case, that sometimes even if they do it the right way, they're full and they don't have a slot for that game?
No, we've not run into that. We've not run into it. If our schools are meeting the production requirements and they want it to be delivered on Plus or 3, we've been able to do that. Yes, that's one advantage of being with a company like ESPN that has the bandwidth, is probably not even the right word, but the capacity to have a very high number of concurrent streams without interruption or latency issues. So that's been a benefit for us for certain.
Awesome. So one of the things that we talk about at the Sports Innovation Lab, and I'll give you a minute to catch your breath as I sort of outline this, there's a concept of the fluid fan, right? So the fluid fan is this not diehard fan, but they move from one sort of media format to another, one sort of sports entertainment to another, and they're empowered to choose, and they're continuously evolving. And if they want to see a game from the University of Hartford or Maine or something like that, they can bounce around. They can see this in different places, and they might like watching it on one format versus another. You have at your schools, I'm assuming, just because I know most of the size of these schools, several 100,000, probably millions now because of the alumni, that are fans that could become subscribers of ESPN Plus, right? What does the media rights deal look like in terms of co-marketing or trying to acquire those former students or active students into that network?
It really falls on us in terms of the marketing piece. ESPN is a good partner for us in terms of co-branding. They're, actually just earlier today got a draft look at a logo that's more integrated from a branding perspective with us and ESPN. So those are obviously useful tools to be connected visually. with a company of that reach and knowledge. People just know what ESPN is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's certainly super helpful. But we have tried. Again, it all connects. I like to think that everything we do, there's a reason and it connects to something else. And so our social media and digital media push is important to us because that's how we connect, engage with our student athletes. We're a conference office. We go to our campuses for championships and for other events here and there, but we don't have the direct relationship with student athletes like our campuses do. And as I have thought about how can we grow our fan base of the America East, in a reasonable way. I grew up in Big Ten country. I was a Big Ten fan growing up. I was a University of Minnesota fan because I lived there, but I was a Big Ten fan too. I see people being proud to be SEC fans and what have you. I want to have an America East fan. And we looked at who are America East fans, who was watching our games, who was engaged with us on social media. It was primarily the people and the student athletes and their families in the 4 and 5 years while they were in school. And then after they graduated, we lost them. We certainly lost touch. Our schools, try to engage them as alums, but we didn't have a connection to them. And I wanted to solve that. We're trying to solve it now with the creation of our alumni network, where we have now, I think, over 600 or 700 people in our database after years of it, trying to extend the relationship with our student athletes because they're our best ambassadors while they're in school. And I think they are our best ambassadors after they graduate. And so in theory, if you look out 5 or 10 years, we will have this community of America East fans that we didn't really have a connection to in the past. And so to the fluid fan piece, I'm hoping that as they are out in the world, not playing sports anymore, we are part of their ecosystem of potential entertainment. If they are a New Hampshire grad, they might go back or watch New Hampshire on TV. I want them to also take a look maybe at that UMBC Vermont game because that's a big game for us in basketball, right? So we're trying to build and grow as incrementally as we have to our fan base so that we get to this place where we actually have a fan base that we can be proud of and point to that is separate from the student athletes that are on campus.
Well, I mentioned at the outset that a lot of your colleagues speak very highly of you. We had Val Ackerman on an AMA. She's the commissioner of the Big East. She's also given enormous amount of credit for getting the WNBA started. And she said, you got to talk to Amy about technology. So let me talk to you quickly about technology. You're doing a pilot in the next few months here, running what we call automated production capabilities. It would be a company like KeyMotion, Pixelot, Playsight. There's a number of these companies out there, and the cameras are smart enough to follow the action, whether it's a puck or a ball, if it's a flow sport, the cameras have enough software intelligence in them to actually follow the action and produce a game, or at least augment the production of a game using that technology. You're running a trial with both of those companies that I mentioned, KeyMotion and Pixelot. Can you tell us a little bit about what the motivation is behind that decision and what you hope to achieve?
Yeah, the pilot, actually, we just finished our first year. The pilot, it was a partnership with ESPN, is actually with Pixelot and Automatic TV. So we had a few Automatic TV units installed at some of our campuses, and a few had Pixelot units installed. And they were focused, like you said, on the flow sports, on the rectangle sports, as they say. And we were really focused on soccer, field hockey, and lacrosse. But yeah, it was to get at what I talked about earlier about how can we deliver more productions to ESPN Plus in a way that is less resource intensive from financial and human. And so, it's a pilot, so we learned some great things from both of those companies. Our schools, some of our schools are going to continue that into next year. And as they watch more games, as those cameras look at more soccer games, their algorithms get better, and it just gets to be a more crisper production. So I'm excited that we're continuing to move forward in year 2 of that pilot, and that our schools are doing this, particularly as we enter an academic year with the pandemic, where even production crews are going to have distancing things and requirements that they're going to have to be mindful of. So it probably is no better time to start kicking the tires on automated production, because it simply requires less people, and it will allow you to do that both from a cost perspective and then to maintain whatever distancing and other requirements are going to be required here as we go into next year.
Are you tech curious? I mean, are you a nerd? Like, are you over at MIT a bunch just looking at some of the cool things that are happening in their media lab and things like that? I mean, you're probably a stone's throw from from the lab itself. Do you do those things?
I don't go over there as much as I can. They've got some secure rooms there that you can't just like pop your.
No, you can't just wander around. That's very true. But I
Um,
would imagine you could get an invitation.
I am very much a nerd. I will say
Okay.
that. And I think
All
everyone
right.
they would think that. I am very tech curious. Very
Okay.
sometimes to my detriment.
Okay. I just wanted to know if I was among friends. So Jim asks, what is your view on basketball transfers and being eligible immediately? Should a coach be able to change? Should a coach be able to change schools and bring current players with them without sitting out a year?
That's a really good question. I generally am supportive of immediate eligibility and transfers for basketball. I know it's one of those issues that we've not settled in over 10 years. There's about half of the Division I membership that thinks you should be able to do that, and half that thinks you shouldn't. And that's one of the reasons why we've not ever reached a resolution, and why just this summer we kicked the can down the road again on that matter. Um, there's lots of reasons, good reasons and arguments that I could support on both sides, candidly, of the issue. I just think at this point in time, in this day and age, the ability and freedom for student athletes to move to institutions for the reasons that they think are best is just, it eliminates a lot of stress in the system, candidly. It might add to some stress for certain, but I think we've got a lot of problems in college athletics. Transfers is important, but it's not, in my mind, the most fundamental of the threats that we're facing externally.
Okay. Jim, thanks for that question. And so let me ask you, before we switch gears totally off the tech stuff, I asked you to prepare your dream RFP before we got on. Do you have an idea of what it would be? And an RFP, for anybody who doesn't know, is you sometimes, as a conference, will say, we need help with this, and issue a request for proposal out into the market. And then all the technology companies can say, yeah, we can do that. So I said, Amy, if you could, if you had a dream, like, what would somebody come and offer you that would make your life a lot easier?
Right now, given the state of play, as our schools are building their protocols and using their own developing their own technology partnerships with apps or what have you for screening student athletes and doing the wellness checks daily with coaches and staff, we're not in a position where we can say all 10 of our schools now have to use the same platform, because that gets baked into the broader institution or whatever. So what I would like is a platform that would integrate data from company A that Stony Brook is using to company B from a University of Vermont is using, integrate it, ingest all of that data in a way that certainly meets HIPAA requirements and all that good stuff, but so that when we're actually competing, when Stony Brook goes to Vermont for that game, that we have a measure, a simple and clear centralized place that we can say Stony Brook meets all the requirements that are required for people who enter the state of Vermont to play and what have you. They tested, if the requirement is that they tested negative in the previous 24 hours, I can see that on my dashboard. And so that integrates all of that data, integrates all the different nuances that might exist from state to state with their policies, so that automatically surfaces. And then there's good reliability and trust that those 20 kids that took the bus trip from Stony Brook to Vermont, we know they're safe and healthy and can play the game in a way that doesn't cause friction or violate any local Vermont policies. That's, in my head, that would be really useful as we get ready for the fall semester.
And in my head, that really is a dream RFP, because I can't even think of whether it's contact tracing solutions, state regulatory databases, CDC stuff, who could legitimately bid on that proposal and be able to look you in the eye and tell you they've got some sort of answer. So look, I mean, you took the challenge and you stumped me. So if anybody else out there knows anything, throw it in the chat window, because I've got nothing on this front. So Joseph asks, I've worked in professional sports for years. How would you transit to college athletics opportunities? And do you feel a master degree is necessary? So he's been working in professional sports for years, wants to move into college sports. Is a master degree necessary? What sort of qualifications do you think are really necessary to make that migration?
Certainly a lot of things are dependent, but I don't think a master's degree in and of itself is necessary. I advanced for a long time without a master's degree, somehow slid under the radar. The master's degree is certainly a credential that can separate you in a crowded field, but depending on how many years of experience you already have on the pro side, that in and of itself could separate you. If you've got 5 years in marketing, then you're going to have some good experience and background to help a campus or a conference in marketing without a master's degree. So it's a combination of all of this.
Yeah, and it certainly depends, I would imagine, on the role that you're trying. If you're in coaching or if you're having some sort of academic liaison, you're probably going to need the higher education. But if you're in sponsorship sales or media, those higher degrees are less relevant. But that brings up a really good topic, which is professional development. And we see this across all of our current clients on the professional side of things. So the Sports Innovation Lab works with the NHL, NFL, UFC, others. And when we talk about what this current environment has caused in terms of, having to move quickly, right? Innovate, have agility to do things differently. They often need to act like product companies, right? Not like sports leagues or sports organizations. They need to be able to look around and have creative people that know how to do things and iterate quickly and all that other thing. This isn't a dig on anybody who works in the professional sports industry, but we don't really operate that way. How do you think about building and developing your people so that you, as a commissioner, can look around and go, guys, we need to go this way real quick. These are the skills I need in my organization.
What we've done, again, it's not right, I'm not saying we're perfect, but I think we've adapted pretty well as we could have. It starts in normal times, right? You can't solve this problem right in the throes of a crisis. You've got to do the work, the hard work, the culture building, the learning, the identification of people who are curious and train them to be curious if they're not completely curious. You've got to do that work in normal times so that when you get to a crisis, you can do all the things that are absolutely necessary to be done to survive and thrive. So we've done that. We, like I mentioned, our quarterly planning sessions, we read articles, we set up things simple things, but important things. Like in our Slack channel, we've got a column for interesting reads that people can throw in articles about leadership or a new technology or what have you. We read a book as a staff twice a year. Sometimes a lot of times it's been on culture, office culture, or individual growth and empowerment and those types of things. The book we're going to read now this summer actually is related to the racial issues. So it's trying to train in a cadence, I guess, in the normal rhythm of an academic year in your work cycle, is inserting points where you remind them that this is important, not just once a year or even 4 times a year at a planning session. Say, oh, by the way, remember, we value collaboration and transparency and creativity. No, it's building that into everything that you do from a workflow perspective. So I don't have the roadmap or recipe. It's organizational dependent, but I always believe if you say that these are your values or these are your operating objectives, you as a leader have to be accountable to that, because people will see right through it, and then you'll never get them to buy in. So I like to think that we have stayed disciplined in trying to implement those things on both a small daily scale so that they become really good habits that we can learn and manage.
I mean, I think that's just a really thoughtful answer. B, it's so true. And C, it's a way for us to talk about the other thing that everybody's trying to do very quickly now, which is become racially diverse, or, open up the conversation to what's happening in our country and around the world more broadly, which is a reaction to some of the disparity and some of the situation that really people don't know how to talk about. And so what I want to do is also acknowledge that you've been working on this for a long time. Some of the things that you've done at the conference are well established, and I want to give us a little bit of space even now to talk a little bit about that before tomorrow, because so many people are being asked to reflect on this again, and we can't stop having this conversation. So why don't you sort of set the stage on how you think about the issue of equality, diversity, how you've made that part of the fabric of your conference, and what you plan on doing next to continue to have that conversation.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'll give a little preamble, if you will. We've been doing what is now called our Spread Respect campaign ever since, I think, 2013. It started with a focus on LGBTQ issues, which, even 7 years ago, we're not in the same place where we were today. You can get married now. You can now, just after the Supreme Court's decision this week, you cannot be fired for being gay, which you could have back in 2013, right? And so it really started with our student athletes, first and foremost. They identified it as an issue that they were concerned about, both whether they identified that way or they want to be good allies for their teammates. So we partnered with, organizations like You Can Play Project and LGBT Sports Safe, and that grew over the years, and we adopted educational programs. We had You Can Play nights that turned now into Spread Respect nights at each of our men's and women's basketball games, one game a year. That's become a persistent part of our campaign over the years. And then in the last, 3 to 4 years, as some of these social issues have come to the fore, given the increased divisiveness in our political landscape, our student athletes, they're citizens of this country. They're engaged in these issues. They're curious. And so they've asked us and encouraged us to spread our focus. We're not walking away from LGBTQ issues by any stretch of the imagination, but we had already started to shift a little bit to spend more time on issues like race and socioeconomic diversity and difference and things like that. So we actually had our first ever in-person Spread Respect Forum last fall, which was fantastic. We talked a lot about these issues, voter registration and all civic engagement. And so I feel like we haven't solved the problem by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like we have the groundwork now, or we've laid the groundwork and the foundation on which we can have some of these difficult conversations that we must have today and in the future, not just today or tomorrow, but next year. I hope we're still talking about racial injustice and equality because they're so important. So again, you got to do the work so that you're prepared to handle and address in a crisis. And I'm hopeful that we can continue to build on the platform that we have, that we've built over the last few years to tackle some of these issues.
Well, I'm asking as much for the audience as I am for myself, because I'm not really sure what to do in this situation, right? Because you can bring together people to have a conversation that can do it more authentically than you. When you have your different universities, you can fund initiatives at the university level. You can, hire and really focus on inclusion and diversity when it comes to open roles. But in this economy, we're all struggling to find the budgets to even hire any staff that we need. So where do you feel like you're going to apply most of your resources in the near term to really kind of keep this conversation front of mind so that we can make sure it doesn't, just fall away like a Twitter trend?
Yeah, yes, exactly. In the short term, we actually just pushed an email to all of our coaches today. We're going to launch our Spread Respect Conversations series, Zoom webinars, just like this, to reach coaches. Our initial target audience is coaches, because they're on the front lines of working with their student athletes.
They're building the culture. They're intervision.
Exactly. And they're the ones. Look, we're the Northeast in some respects is incredibly diverse. In some respects, it is absolutely not diverse. And our campuses are reflections of the states and communities in where they reside. And so we've got some differences in numbers and lack of ethnic or racial diversity at our schools. And so some of our coaches, some of our administrators, some of our staff are struggling with how to really tackle this, both with their white student athletes, but also with their Black student athletes. And so we want to provide some resources to our frontline folks, coaches, eventually getting towards academic advisors, athletic trainers, because those are the people that really, aside from an assistant coach, who really spend a lot of time with their student athletes and learn a lot more than they probably should or wish they wanted to learn about their student athletes, but they've got to be front and center and have tools and resources to talk to their student athletes. So that's just an early step, Josh. We're going to do a task force or working group of some form or fashion being deliberate on that because I want to set it up properly so that it is built to last and not just built for the moment.
Love it. Okay. Well, I'm going to give everybody, we're coming toward the end of the hour here, everybody a chance to ask any last questions. Chris asked, do you have any discussions with your students about the loss of the season, right? Because many of them weren't able to finish their spring seasons. And do you think there will be a bit of a scholarship logjam for spring sports?
We did have a little bit of a conversation with our student athletes. Again, not being on campus, it's not the most intimate or personal conversation, candidly, but I did speak with our conference's student athlete advisory committee, whether it was in late March or early April, I can't remember, to talk through some of that. There's just frustration, sadness. It was still in the moment. It's a traumatic experience, especially for our senior.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of mental health issues that stem from this too, right? I mean, it's a lot of depression and a lot of,
what do you say to someone like that? You just listen and you provide support. And so that's what we've tried to do. And it flips now to the fall. People are nervous about the fall. We've still got to provide that same level of support, emotional and mental support to them.
And we've said, at least in the professional ranks, and you see this in all the headlines, with the bubble strategy for the NBA and the NHL and Major League Baseball struggling with their labor conversations. A lot of the strategies for return to play are going to be regional. You've got schools that are clustered regionally, right, geographically. Does that make your life easier in sort of thinking about what the fall looks like, or is it really very difficult still to do state by state, jurisdiction by jurisdiction to just follow what the hell's going on?
It is exponentially more difficult, I think, college sports and in pro sports because of those reasons, Josh.
Right.
Because state by state, we can't move all of our college teams to a bubble. One, there's no bubble in the universe that's big enough for all of college athletics because there's so many more teams than there are in Major League Baseball or the NBA. But also that these are college students and they're there to go to college. They're also there, they're playing sports while they're there, but they're to go to college. And so they live in different places. You can't control all of those things and all of their movements. And that's because they're students. You can when it's your job, like it is in NBA, or at least they're trying to do that, right? The problem becomes exponentially more challenging and complex at the college level.
Well, as a former college student, I can also tell you that I wasn't very bright back then. I thought I was invincible, jumped out of airplanes and did a lot of stupid things. So I think you have a lot of smart schools in your conference. Maybe the students are a little bit better equipped than I was to think about, my own vulnerability. But we're rooting for you, and we're rooting for, all of your schools to come back, have a great fall, and hopefully they can do that safely. And Amy, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I never like to have the last word here. So is there anything you want to end with? Anything you want to share with our guests before we wrap up?
No, I just candidly appreciate what you all are doing. I'm in that Slack community, candidly, so I'll give you a little plug there. For anyone who's listening or watching that isn't in that Slack community, absolutely get in there. It's overwhelming, but there's so much good stuff. It's great networking. You learn so many things. So I really applaud you for setting that up right away. I think you guys were on top of that very soon after things shut down. So it's been great to learn about what's going on in the industry at large. And I appreciate you, you mentioned Val. I know Bernie McGlade from the A10 has been one of your guests. I appreciate, the integration of college sports into some of your research and your projects and your communities. That's important. I know there's a much broader sports industry than just college, but selfishly and clearly biased, but college sports plays a big role in our society. And so I appreciate, your interest and support for those of us in this part of the industry.
Well, I think you just mentioned two other very powerful and influential women, and we're so blessed to be able to leverage Angela's relationships in this industry to give voices to people who really need to be heard a lot more. And so this was a really great opportunity to do that. Thank you for joining us today, Amy. And Shannon, you want to wrap us up?
Yep. Let me just share my screen here. Thank you, Amy. That was great. And thank you for mentioning the Slack community. So just as a reminder, here is the link. And we just ask that when you do join, if you can introduce yourself and let us know who you are and what your background is, that would be great. And also a reminder, next Thursday, June 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern, time, we'll be joined by Rajan Mehta, who is the Chief Product and Technology Officer for the WWE. And we'll be talking about media convergence and innovation and the WWE's effort to reach fans across the globe using different media channels with different.
Yeah, they do some crazy stuff. They have like 10 million social followers. This is going to be another good one. So join us if you can, guys.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next week. And thank you, Amy. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Amy. Be safe.